everybody, so with the release of Spy from the Book of Saw this weekend, I thought this was the perfect time to go back, revisit all the films in the Saw franchise, and then give my updated personal ranking from worst to best when it comes to every film in the series with Spy from the Book of Saw. It's been a lot of fun revisiting all these films, although it has been a lot of blood, guts, and gore from all the gnarly traps that we see throughout the franchise. Before getting to my list of how I'd rank the films from worst to best, make sure to leave your list down below how you'd rank the franchise from worst to best. There's a lot of films to get through. We have 9 now, so let's get right into my number 9 pick. With my number 9 pick, I have Saw 3D. Now, at this point in the series, it was very clear that it was losing all its momentum and its audience as well, because up until this point, each film was making less and less money, so they went the 3D route. Now, it did make a little bit more with the final chapter, but it still failed in all aspects. At this point, it was so far removed from the original philosophy of John Kramer that it was just too much, and the film as a whole has my least favorite story when it comes to Sean Patrick Flannery's character and him faking being a survivor of the Jigsaw traps. I also just didn't really like that his family had to suffer for the things that he did in his life. I thought that was extremely mean-spirited, even for the Saw franchise. Coupling that with the fact this is probably my least favorite of the films when it comes to all of the different traps. All of the different Saw traps in this really weren't my favorites. Chester Bennington's was alright, but also the reverse bear trap on Jill was kind of like the only saving grace when it comes to the traps. At this point, the formula just got really old when it comes to stuff like introducing Carrie Elwes back into the story as a secret apprentice, which is a very tired trope at this point. It's just the same formula over and over again, and I just probably my least favorite out of all of the bunch when it comes to all of the different Saw sequels. With my number 8 pick, I have Saw 4. Now, the first film after the death of John Kramer, this was when the series kind of got rocky with me for a little bit. This was definitely the film where it felt more like the story was transitioning into a new era after John Kramer's death. And it didn't really hook me right away. The two storylines we have converging between the investigation aspect and following Riggs wasn't my favorite in particular. And this was the film where everything started to get very convoluted and confusing when it comes to the storylines, and we see the backstory, the flashbacks of John Kramer, and the stuff we see in present day with Hoffman taking over the reins. I do have to give the film credit though, because it does have some really gnarly traps in it, like the bedroom one and also the scalping one. Both of those in general just make me cringe. Probably some of the grossest ones of the entire series. I even like that we get to see Donnie Wahlberg return as Detective Matthews, at least until he gets his head smashed between 2 ice blocks. I suppose it was also kind of fun to see that Saw 3 and Saw 4 were pretty much going on at the exact same time with the way that this film ended. But yeah, there was a couple things to enjoy, but overall, like when it comes to the story and all that stuff, it just wasn't one of my favorites. For my number 7 pick, I have Jigsaw. Now, after 7 years between this and Saw 3D, we finally get a new entry in the Saw franchise, and this was kind of supposed to be a rejuvenation to the franchise to bring it back, and while I'm not a big fan overall of what they did in Jigsaw, I think this is probably one of the more rewatchable sequels. It doesn't particularly do anything we haven't seen before from the franchise, the standard gory traps and all that stuff, but I found myself really actually enjoying the mystery angle in Jigsaw. With how all these murders are happening in real time as we see the game going on with the mystery on the outside. It's just a shame as the film goes on, it falls apart a little bit and we fall back into those usual Saw franchise tropes, like having Logan yet again be another apprentice to John Kramer. We haven't seen that twist before done so many times in the franchise. At this point, it's just gotten kind of old. For me, it kind of just felt like a really cheap way to shoehorn Tobin Bell into Jigsaw, even though he's been dead since Saw 3. As for the traps in Jigsaw, I think for the most part they were actually kind of toned down a bit compared to the previous entries when they just went completely crazy. At least until we got to the last one when it comes to Halloran's death and the lasers just cut his head into a meat butterfly. That one was really intense and very unconventional when compared to a lot of the other Saw traps in the series. My number 6 pick, I have Saw 5. Now for me, this felt a little bit more memorable than Saw 4. I also think that both of the storylines going on as well were a little bit more straightforward. I really liked the cat and mouse elements between Agent Strahm and Hoffman. I thought that was engaging as a storyline, even up until the point where Agent Strahm gets squished. That was a really shocking way to end that storyline, but I also think that the actual game itself was also one of the more interesting ones. It has some fun different twists to it that you don't really see in some of the other Saw films with them having to work together. It is just extremely frustrating that it was so obvious that they were supposed to work together in all these traps because they had all this space in some of them. It was very clear that they could have easily made it through all of them until the end. But what can you do, I guess? A very middle of the road sequel, not one of my favorites, not one of my least favorites. I mean, with my number 5 pick, I have Saw 6. This seems to be the most polarizing of all the Saw films. This is one of those films that some people have really high up, some people have really low. I actually do really enjoy it. I think it is a fun, different kind of out there take when it comes to the Saw franchise, having this whole insurance companies are evil storyline. It does still have all of those formulaic things we've seen in these Saw sequels when it comes to the confusing John Kramer flashbacks, and some of the traps are a little bit over the top, going into the more torture porn-esque territory. But I do actually think some of the traps in this are quite fun, particularly the shotgun carousel trap. I think that's probably what bumps us up a little bit more than some of the other films lower down. If it didn't have that trap, I think it would be much lower, but between the goofy insurance stuff and that shotgun carousel trap, I think that's what bumps it up to at least the midpoint of the series. My number 4 pick, I have Saw 3. Now, this was kind of the point in the series where things started to get darker, darker, crazier. They really embraced that here when it comes to all the different traps in Saw 3. For me, this had one of the more interesting games going on when it comes to Jeff having to take on all these people he blames for the death of his son while Lynn is taking care of Jigsaw. It's just a shame that Jeff is so terrible when it comes to saving people. That's probably one of the main frustrating things about watching Saw 3. All around, it's just better crafted than some of the later sequels with a lot of fun twists, and it seemed like a natural conclusion to John Kramer with his death in Saw 3. I would have never guessed seeing Saw 3 back in 2006 that we would still be seeing Saw sequels to this day, even most of them with John Kramer involved, even though he died so long ago. But here we are, still talking about Saw films to this day. I think also what pushes Saw 3 so much higher on the list than some of the other sequels is it probably has my favorite trap of the entire series, the rack. I mean, that trap just makes me cringe watching it each time. It's probably one of the most brutal, if not the most brutal trap in the entire Saw franchise, and it still just makes me wince just thinking about it. For my number 3 pick, I have Spiral from the Book of Saw. Now, I don't want to touch upon this film too much just because it is actually in theaters this weekend. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think this is a really great way to rejuvenate the franchise, more so than Jigsaw did, even if it is by the same writers. It has all the things that make the first few Saw films so special when it comes to the mystery elements, the suspense, the tension, the psychological elements. I also just really like Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson in the roles that they portray. I think they kind of breathe fresh new life into the series with the characters they portray, and also it's just a very entertaining film all around. It has some really great gnarly traps for fans of the Saw franchise, and it's one of those films that does a really great job of paying homage to things that fans from the Saw series love, while also making a good modern horror film in the horror genre. For my number 2 pick, I have Saw 2. This was the film that firmly cemented that John Kramer is a great horror villain, and Tobin Bell does a great job in the role in this film because he has a lot more to do in this film since he was kind of just on the floor for most of the first one. Plus, I felt that Donnie Wahlberg was a very fun lead character to follow along in Saw 2. The game itself in Saw 2 also is quite good. It's loaded with a lot of various inventive, inciting traps. Plus, there's just a fun urgency to the story since we're kind of on a timer throughout the entire thing. Also, this film had one of the better twists with Amanda being a Jigsaw's secret apprentice. I thought that was great. Shawnee Smith was awesome in these films. It's a shame that we don't really talk about her all that much, but I do love Saw 2. It has some of the coolest traps, some of the most inventive and interesting storylines, and honestly, it was really tough deciding between this and my number 1 because I think they're kind of neck and neck when it comes to how much I love them. And with my number 1 pick, I have Saw. The first film I think is so influential in the horror genre. It was very innovative, and it's probably one of the big horror classics probably of the modern era. James Wan and Leigh Whannell masterfully crafted this suspenseful horror film that delivers a great mix of shock and thrills, even despite that very low budget. Looking back, you could definitely tell that the film is quite low budget compared to other films, but it's really impressive what they're able to do stretching that budget to make such a great film with a lot of fun mystery behind it. And also, I just really like the psychological aspects that was kind of missing as the series went on, and that's really evident here in the first Saw film. And also, we have the amazing reveal at the end, the twist that John Kramer was on the floor the entire time in the room with them. Probably one of my favorite horror twists of all time, if I'm being honest. It was just such a bone-chilling and creepy way to end off the film, and it's part of why I really think that this film has such a legacy that it has to this day. And there you have it. That's my ranking of all of the Saw films ranked from worst to best. It's been a lot of fun going on this journey talking about all the different Saw films in the Saw franchise with you guys. I am excited to see what you guys think of Spiral from the Book of Saw when it hits the theaters this weekend, but also I'm just excited to see what your rankings are for the film series as well. Where would you rank Spiral from the Book of Saw in your personal ranking once you do check out the film? But even if you haven't seen the film, I still would love to know your ranking of all of the films from worst to best in the Saw franchise, because part of the fun of this all is having a discussion with you guys in the comment section down below, so make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below, because I love talking about all things movie and TV with you guys on the channel. Thank you so much for checking out my rankings, though. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like it, the subscribe button. We'll keep making reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more on the channel. But next time, I'll see you guys later.